Or as it is with a philosopher when he reads a book written in the defense of some position, as suppose the doctrine of the circulation of the blood. Possibly his mind may be discomposed, and his brains by reason of some peccant humor much distempered, and in this case he reads the book, but is not at all satisfied by it. Afterwards, physical means are applied, whereby the brain is restored to its native constitution, and purged from those distempers whereby it was clouded. Now he returns to the book again, and reads it over anew, and yields himself captive to the opinion. You see, here is no change of the old arguments, nor any addition of new ones. Only the impediments which were in the faculty, or the organ, are removed. Just so it is in the matter now in controversy. The Spirit of God doth not prove the Scripture to me by arguments which I never had before, but by the illumination of my mind, to apprehend the arguments which I did not apprehend before. It is with men, as it was with Hagar in Genesis 21. There was a well of water, but she saw it not till God opened her eyes, in verse 19. There is a self-evidencing light in the Scriptures. Only the Spirit of God cures that blindness of mind, whereby the devil hindered the world from discerning it. Thus the Spirit convinced the Jews of the truth of the gospel by removing the veil which was upon their hearts in the reading of Moses, in 2 Corinthians 3, verses 15 and 16. And so God convinced his elect among the heathens, not by discovering any more arguments to them than he did to the reprobates among them, for the same doctrine and arguments were preached to both alike, but by opening the eyes to see what others saw not, Acts 26, verse 18, and by opening their hearts to receive what others would not receive, as Acts 16, verse 14. To conclude, forasmuch as the testimony of the Spirit is not the argument for which, but only the instrument by which they believe, and on the contrary, the testimony of Scripture is the proper argument for which they believe, it is most evident that they work in several capacities, and so we are fully discharged from that circle, which they causelessly charge against us with us. And notwithstanding this objection, the foundation of our faith standeth sure. This is the first particular. Section 13. The other particular concerns the popish foundation, for some of the Romanists, finding themselves so woefully entangled in the business of infallibility, are grown sick of the notion. Cressy, the English apostate, in his Exomologesis, confesseth that infallibility is an unfortunate word combated by Mr. Chillingsworth with too great success, that he could wish the word were forgotten, or at least laid by. These therefore tell us that if the infallibility of the Church be denied, yet a papist hath sufficient ground for his faith in the Church's authority, in which he is obliged to acquiesce, and whom he must hear in all things, and this way some others go. This I thought fit to mention, that the world may see the complexion of a Romish conscience, and the desperate shifts which the wretchedness of their cause forceth them to. But because the absurdity of this new fancy doth sulla luce conster, I shall dismiss it with two remarks upon it. First, that it is disclaimed by the Romish Church, and it were a frivolous thing to concern ourselves in refuting all the wild fancies of their particular doctors. It is true, Cressy saith, no such word as infallibility is to be found in any council. The good man had forgot the definition of the Council of Basel, wherein they called it a pernicious error to say that a council can err. The passage I cited before, or else he meant to be witty, for it is very true that non potest errare is not the same word with infallibility, though it be the same thing. Nor do the papists only assert the infallibility of their church, but generally acknowledge that without this, their faith would have no solid foundation, nor their religion any certainty. I shall not multiply instances in so known a thing. You have many instances in one, in the aforementioned passage of the Council of Basel, that if once that pernicious error were admitted, that general councils may err, the whole Catholic faith would totter. And Bellarmine in a forequoted passage confesseth that it is a most unreasonable thing to require Christians to be finally subject to the judgment of that church which is liable to error. And therefore I need not cast away precious time in confuting those particular fancies of some private doctors, which are directly repugnant unto the confessed opinion of the Pope and the decree of a general council. Secondly, this is so far from mending the matter that it makes it far worse. For he that saith, I am bound to believe the Church in all things, because she is infallible in all things, speaks that which is coherent in itself, and the consequence is agreeable to reason. The only fault lies in the antecedent. But he that saith, I am bound to believe the church in all things, though she may err in many things, and none knows how many, throws himself and me upon such desperate rocks as none but a madman would run upon. When Bellarmine delivers that desperate doctrine, that if the Pope should command us to sin, we are bound to obey him, and then others have said that if the Pope should lead thousands to hell, we must not reprove him, their followers mollify the harshness of those assertions with this favorable construction, that the propositions are only hypothetical, depending upon such conditions as by reason of the promise of infallibility can never be fulfilled, for, say they, the Pope cannot command sin and cannot lead men to hell, and this, if true, were a plausible evasion. But to tell me that if the Pope or Church may err, yet I am bound to believe and obey them in all things, this is to make that my duty which God hath threatened as a terrible curse, 2 Thessalonians 2. That is, to believe lies. This is to confront the Apostle, Acts 5, and to say that it is better to obey men than God, when their commands are contrary. This is to bring me under a necessity of that woe, denounced against such as call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, Isaiah 5, verse 20. This is to say that I am bound to follow my blind leaders, though it be into the ditch. That I am under an obligation of offending God for making him a liar, and of damning my own soul. This is to say that the Israelites were bound to obey Aaron's idolatrous decree concerning the observation of the feast of the calf. Nay, more, that the Jews were bound to obey their church in putting Christ to death, though they had at that time known him to be the true Messiah. In a word, such and so many are the prodigious absurdities which would inevitably follow from the wild assertion that madness itself, unless in its highest paroxysm, could not equal it. And when the authors of it come to themselves, or return to the judgment of their own church, or when their church comes over to their opinion, and lays aside their bold pretenses to infallibility, they may expect a farther answer. But since I wrote this, I find Mr. Cressy hath saved me the labor of farther answer. For in his second edition, and secundae cognations sunt meliores, I find him sick of his former notion. I suppose he hath met with sharp rebukes from his wiser brethren. What penances or censures they have inflicted on him I know not, but the effect is visible, and the man is brought to a recanting strain. And that he may have some colorable palliation for it, he pretends he was misunderstood, and that he never meant to deny infallibility to the Church, save only in the most rigorous sense that the term could import, and therefore he roundly asserts that the Church can neither deceive believers that follow her, nor be deceived herself. And infallibility and authority are in effect all one as applied to the Church. For to say that the Church hath authority to oblige all Christians to receive her doctrines, and withal to say she is fallible, is extremity of injustice and tyranny. So this pretense is also gone after the rest, and therefore from all that hath been discoursed and proved, I may take the boldness to conclude that the faith of a papist, if he keep to his own principles, hath no foundation, or is not built upon the rock, but merely upon the sand, or, in the prophet's language, they have forsaken the Scriptures, the fountain of living water, to hew cut unto themselves broken cisterns that can hold no water.